She pulled two little girls from a burning wreck with her bare hands in the middle of a snowstorm, shielded them with her own body until the ambulance came, held them through the night in a hospital where nobody came to claim them, and then spent 6 months fighting a system designed to exhaust people like her, just to be allowed to call herself their mother. She thought she was saving them. She had no idea they were the same two daughters she had buried in her heart 5 years ago, the ones a hospital told her never made it through the night she gave birth alone, terrified and 22 years old. She had no idea the man whose sins started everything was already moving in the shadows. And she had absolutely no idea that the two little girls drawing pictures at her kitchen table were about to crack open a secret so enormous, so deliberately buried, that it would bring powerful people to their knees. Hadley thought she was saving strangers from a frozen wreck. She had no idea she was holding the daughters she buried 5 years ago. If your chest is already tight, stay with this story, because this one does not let go. Before we continue, hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. And comment, "I'm not alone and I love your stories." It encourages me and wants me to create more amazing stories for you.
The highway was completely white. Not the soft, cinematic white of a gentle snowfall, the violent, visibility-stealing white of a February storm that had been predicted and ignored by everyone who had somewhere to be that evening. The kind of white that makes headlights useless, the kind that turns a road into a guess. Hadley Vickers was driving back from a board meeting. Not a community center meeting, not a counseling session, a board meeting. The kind held on the 14th floor of a building with a private elevator and a security desk that knew her name before she said it. She had changed out of what she wore in that room before getting into her car. She always did. The woman she was in that room, and the woman she moved through the rest of her life as, were two different architectures, and she kept them separated with the same quiet discipline she applied to everything that mattered. She was 27 years old. She was exhausted in the specific way of someone who carries two lives simultaneously and has never once set either one down to rest. She almost didn't see the SUV. It was off the road, rolled, not skidded, the kind of impact that happens fast and ends slower. Black vehicle, expensive, heavy, lying on its side in the embankment with one wheel still spinning in the frozen air like it hadn't accepted what had happened yet. There was smoke coming from the hood. Not fire, not yet. Hadley pulled over before she decided to. Her body made that choice. Her mind caught up on the way to the door. The cold outside was the kind that punishes. 12 degrees with a wind that made it feel like less. She ran through knee-deep snow in heels she didn't stop to remove. Later, she would find bruises on both shins from where the ice had bitten through her stockings. She wouldn't remember getting them. The front of the vehicle was destroyed. The woman behind the wheel, 50s, professionally dressed, seatbelt on, was gone in the way Hadley recognized from the 2 seconds she allowed herself to look. There was nothing to be done there. She did not let herself stop. She moved to the back. 2 car seats. 2 little girls.
5 years old, maybe? Identical. The kind of identical that makes you look twice, then a third time, because the precision of it feels almost deliberate. Same dark lashes, same small mouth, same fine black hair pressed against pale cheeks by the cold already working its way into the vehicle. One was conscious. She was looking directly at Hadley with an expression of complete, unnerving stillness, dark eyes wide open, taking in every detail of this stranger's face with the focused attention of a child who had learned very early that the first thing you do in a new situation is read the room. The other was unconscious, a cut on her temple, breathing, shallow but present. Hey baby, I'm here. I've got you." The conscious one reached out and took Hadley's hand, not desperately, not with panic, with a quiet, decided grip that said, "I have assessed the situation. I have assessed you. You will do." Hadley would think about that grip for the rest of her life.
She got them both out. She wrapped them both inside her coat, her expensive, heavy, cashmere-lined coat that she would never once regret ruining, and she sat in the snow with both of them pressed against her chest, one conscious and watching, one breathing softly against her collarbone, and she held them with the ferocity of a woman who had once been told she would never hold children of her own again. She held them like she already knew. She didn't, not yet, but something in her body did. The conscious girl's name was Leora. She announced this in the ambulance with the careful precision of someone delivering important information to someone who needed it. Clear, direct. Her dark eyes never left Hadley's face. "And your sister?" Hadley asked. "Laura," Leora said. "She draws things, so she remembers them, in case they go away." Hadley looked at the unconscious child, at Laura's small, still face, at the sketchbook still clutched in her left hand even through the crash, through the cold, through everything, and felt something move through her chest that she did not have a name for yet. The caretaker had no emergency contacts on her person. The girls had no documentation beyond first names. The private care arrangement they had been living under was, the hospital administrator told Hadley with the apologetic exhaustion of someone navigating a legal wall in real time, complex. Complex how? Hadley asked. The kind of complex, he said quietly, that has lawyers behind it. Hadley looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked through the glass at Leora, who was sitting up in the hospital bed eating crackers with focused efficiency, and at Laura, who had regained consciousness an hour ago and was already drawing in her sketchbook, drawing the room, drawing the machines, drawing Hadley's face from memory with a brown crayon, getting the eyes exactly right. "I'm not leaving." It was not a request, it was not a negotiation. It was the first true sentence she had spoken in 5 years that cost her nothing, because it came from a place so far below strategy, so far below caution and careful living, that it was simply and completely true. The administrator nodded slowly. "I'll start the temporary guardian paperwork," he said.
What nobody in that hospital knew, what nobody in Hadley's life knew, was that she had already lived this moment before. 5 years ago. A different hospital, a different bed, the same crushing silence. She had been 22 years old, a final year student at Harrington University, the kind of student who never needed to raise her hand twice, the kind whose name professors remembered long after she left the room. She had worked for every single thing she had, not because life gave her no other choice, but because excellence was the only language she trusted. And then, one night, one single night, everything she had built so carefully cracked open. There was a gala, a university event. She had been personally invited as the top student of her year. She had dressed carefully, arrived alone, smiled the right smiles. That was where she first saw him. Kim Yun, 30 years old, Korean, CEO of one of the most powerful companies on 3 continents. The kind of man who walks into a room and the room quietly rearranges itself around him. Sharp jaw, cold eyes, a face that looked like it had never once broken into an unplanned smile. He had looked at her across that ballroom, and something in that look had felt less like admiration and more like a decision being made. She remembered the drink she hadn't finished. She remembered waking up somewhere that was not her room. She remembered staring at a gray ceiling and understanding, slowly, horribly, like cold water rising, exactly what had happened. She never told a single person. Not because she had nobody to tell, but because she was 22, on a scholarship, with no money and no connections, and he was a billionaire surrounded by lawyers who had probably handled things far worse than her. So she went back to her dormitory. She went back to her books. She pressed it down into the deepest part of herself, and she kept moving, because moving was the only thing she knew how to do. Then, 8 weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. She wanted to keep them. That is the part that never gets said.
That is the part that gets lost in the clean, official version of events that would later be written in files she was never shown.
She wanted them. She sat in her dormitory room at 3 in the morning with her hands flat on her stomach, and she made a promise, quiet, fierce, completely alone. I will carry you. Whatever it costs me, I will carry you. A doctor she had never called showed up at her door 2 weeks later. Polite, professional, carrying paperwork. She sent him away. He came back. She sent him away again. They moved her, quietly, efficiently, the way powerful people move problems, to a private hospital she had not chosen, doctors she had not picked, a room she had not booked. She told herself it would be okay. She told herself that whatever else was happening around her, the babies inside her were hers, and nobody could take what was hers. She was wrong. The birth came early, too early, her body exhausted, her heart terrified, no family in that room, just white walls and the sound of machines, and a doctor whose face she would never forget. He stood at the foot of her bed. His expression was practiced, carefully, professionally soft. "Miss Vickers," he said, "I am so sorry. The twins did not survive." She did not cry in front of him. She did not cry in front of any of them. She signed the papers they placed in front of her, because she was 22, and her body had just been through something it may never fully recover from, and the grief was so enormous, so total, that it had swallowed every other feeling whole. She went home. She finished her degree. She graduated at the top of her class, stood at that podium, shook hands with people who had no idea what she was carrying, and smiled a smile that cost her more than any of them would ever know. She became a child trauma counselor. She told herself it was a career choice. She knew, in the place below knowing, the place we never say out loud, exactly why she sat across from broken children every single day and fought for them the way nobody had fought for her. She was looking for something she could not name. And for 5 years, 5 long, disciplined, quietly devastating years, she had carried one question in the very back of her mind, in the 3 a.m. moments when the walls came down and the silence got too loud. What if they were wrong? She never spoke it, never followed it to its end. Because what if she followed it and found nothing? What if she pulled that thread and the answer was simply, the hospital was right, your children are gone, and you have been carrying a hope that was never real? That was the one thing she was not sure she could survive. So she kept the question locked inside her chest, and she kept moving. Until tonight. Until 2 little girls pulled from a wreck, wrapped in her coat, breathing against her chest in the back of an ambulance, turned their faces toward hers. And she saw it. On the left wrist of the conscious one, on the left wrist of the unconscious one, a small crescent-shaped birthmark. Identical, both of them. The exact same mark she had seen once, only once, on the inside of a wrist in a hotel room she had spent 5 years trying not to remember. She did not move. She did not speak. She sat very still in that ambulance and felt something shift inside her chest. Deep, tectonic, the kind of shift you feel before you understand it. Like a door she had bolted shut from the inside was beginning, slowly, to open on its own. She did not know yet. Not fully. Not in words. But something in her blood did. Something in her blood had known from the moment she reached into that wreck and felt those small hands, had known before her mind was anywhere close to ready, that these were not just any children. These were hers. And in a tower across the city, floor-to-ceiling windows, engineered silence, the kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature. A man named Kim Yoon sat alone at a desk he was not working at, just sitting. The way a man sits when he has built everything and still wakes up every morning feeling like something essential is missing. He did not know what was coming. He did not know that 5 years of silence was about to end. He did not know that the night he had buried, the one he had never let himself look directly at, had just come back into the world. in the form of two little girls who had his eyes and their mother's unbreakable heart. Outside, the snow was still falling, heavy, relentless, like the sky was trying to cover something up. It was already too late. Do you think Hadley already knows in her heart those girls are hers? That birthmark just told Hadley everything, or is she just desperate enough to believe it? Drop your answer below, because up next reveals something about those twins that will make your jaw drop. Before we continue, hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from.
6 months. That is how long they made her wait. 6 months of forms that led to more forms. 6 months of home visits from caseworkers who walked through her apartment with clipboards and careful eyes, opening cupboards, testing taps, asking questions designed to find a reason to say no. 6 months of a system that was built, she became increasingly convinced, not to place children in loving homes, but to exhaust people until they stopped trying. Hadley did not stop. She showed up to every appointment early. She filed every document the same day it was requested. She sat across from caseworkers half her intelligence and twice her authority, and she smiled and answered and gave them absolutely nothing to use against her. She was very good at that, giving nothing away. The girls came home on a Thursday. Leora walked in first, assessed the apartment in approximately 4 seconds, and announced that the couch was the wrong color. Laura walked in behind her, said nothing, sat down on that same couch, opened her sketchbook and began to draw. Hadley stood in her own doorway and felt something she had no category for. Leora tested her daily, skipped dinner to see what would happen, asked questions designed to destabilize. Why don't you have a husband? Why do you live alone? What happens to us if you get tired of us? Each question delivered with the precise calm of a child who had learned that adults leave and wanted to find out exactly when. Hadley answered every single one, without flinching, without looking away. Laura never tested her. Laura simply watched and drew. She drew the apartment. She drew Leora. She drew Hadley standing at the kitchen stove with her back turned, and somehow captured in a 5-year-old crayon lines the exact weight a person carries in their shoulders when they are holding themselves together by will alone. It was during bath time, a Tuesday, ordinary, unremarkable, that Hadley saw it. Laura's left wrist. A small crescent mark, the color of a faint bruise, perfectly formed. She checked Leora's wrist the next morning. Same mark, same wrist, same crescent. Hadley stood in that hallway long after the girls had grabbed their bags and run to the door, stood completely still, one hand pressed flat against the wall, and felt the question she had carried in silence for 5 years stop being a question. What if they were wrong? It wasn't a question anymore. Before we continue, hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. She saw the car before she saw him. Black sedan, parked outside her building every morning for 3 days straight, not doing anything, just there, the way trouble is, quiet before it isn't. On the 4th day, it was gone. On the 5th day, someone knocked on her door. She opened it, and the air left her body. She knew his face, not from the news, not from a magazine cover. She knew it from a night she had spent 5 years trying to unknow, from a hotel room she had woken up in at 22 years old, alone and confused and understanding slowly, too slowly, what had happened to her. He hadn't changed at all. Same cold eyes, same jaw, same way of standing like the world owed him stillness. He didn't say hello, didn't apologize for showing up unannounced. A man beside him in a suit pushed a folder into her hands before she could say a word. Legal documents, his name on every page. Words like prior custody and immediate transfer sitting on the paper like they were already decided. She didn't read them. She looked straight at him. "My girls are sleeping inside," she said, calm. Flat. Final. "Nobody is transferring anything today." He blinked. Just once.
like he genuinely could not process what she had just said to him. Then she felt it, a small hand sliding into hers from behind, fingers wrapping around hers and holding on, not out of fear, out of choice, the deliberate, decided grip of a child who had already made up her mind. Leora, standing right beside her at the door, 5 years old, looking up at this tall stranger in his expensive coat with absolutely no fear on her face whatsoever. Just a look that said, "I see you, and I'm not moving." The hallway went quiet. Kim Yoon looked down at her, and something in his face, just for a second, fell apart. He looked away first. Leora just stood her ground against the most powerful man in the city, but Kim Yoon discovered in a private file that will turn this whole story upside down. The court did not give him the girls, but it did not give them fully to Hadley either. Supervised visits, twice a week, a legal arrangement so cold and mechanical it felt like both of them were being punished for something neither of them had been formally charged with yet. Hadley sat across from her attorney and listened, and kept her face completely still, and drove home and sat in her parked car for 11 minutes before going inside. She did not tell the girls what was happening. She did not need to. Leora already knew. She always knew. He started showing up on Tuesdays and Thursdays at exactly the agreed time. Not a minute early, not a minute late. Always the dark coat. Always the same controlled expression. Always 2 men waiting by the sedan downstairs like punctuation at the end of a sentence that said, "I have not lost yet." Hadley would open the door and step aside and say nothing beyond what was necessary. He would enter and say nothing beyond what was necessary. The apartment felt smaller with him in it, not because of his size, because of the silence he carried. Thick, pressurized, the silence of a man holding an enormous amount in with both hands and never once letting it show. Leora ignored him with pointed expertise. But Laura watched him the way she watched everything, quietly, completely, from whatever corner she had folded herself into. And somewhere around the 3rd visit, Hadley noticed it. The sketchbook, open on the coffee table. A new drawing. A tall figure in a dark coat standing near the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at something the drawing didn't show. She had got the shoulders exactly right. That particular tension, that specific loneliness. Hadley stared at it for a long time. She didn't say anything to Laura. She didn't say anything to him. But that night, after the girls were asleep, she sat at her kitchen table and felt the first uncomfortable thought she did not want to have. He loves them too. Laura just drew the one thing nobody in that room was willing to say out loud, but up next reveals what Hadley finds at 2 a.m. that will make that drawing the least shocking thing in this entire story. She wasn't looking for it. That is the part that undid her completely. She wasn't investigating, she wasn't searching. She was sitting at her kitchen table at 2 in the morning with cold tea and a laptop, doing what she sometimes did when sleep wouldn't come, reading things that didn't require her to feel anything. She typed his name into the search bar almost without deciding to. Kim Yun KY Global. Pages of results. Forbes profiles, business acquisitions, conference appearances, the curated, polished public image of a man who controlled exactly what the world was allowed to see of him. She scrolled without purpose. And then she stopped. An old photograph, a charity event from 7 years ago. He was younger in it, slightly less guarded, caught mid-turn by a camera he hadn't noticed yet. His coat sleeve had ridden up. His left wrist was visible. Hadley leaned forward, and the breath left her body and did not immediately come back. A small crescent mark, faint, perfectly formed, sitting on the inside of his left wrist in the exact position, the exact shape, the exact size as the marks on both her daughters. Her daughters. She pushed back from the table so fast the chair scraped loud against the floor, and she froze, listening for movement from the girls' room. Nothing. Just silence and the sound of her own heartbeat doing something irregular and frightening in her chest. She sat back down. She looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she opened a new tab, then another and another. Hospital records, birth certificates, private medical foundations. She pulled every thread she could find with bare hands at 2 in the morning, fueled by something that had moved beyond grief now, something quieter and more dangerous than grief. She found walls everywhere, sealed files, private arrangements, language designed specifically to stop someone exactly like her from getting exactly this far. But she kept going, because somewhere inside all that deliberate silence was the answer to a question that had been killing her slowly for 5 years. She was not going to stop until she found it. The message came on a Wednesday morning. No name, just a number she didn't recognize, and 7 words that made her sit down immediately. "I was there the night your babies were born." She called back before she had fully decided to. The voice on the other end was old, tired, the specific tiredness of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has finally put it down and cannot pick it up again. His name was Dr. Amechi, former administrator, retired now, sick in the way that makes people want to settle accounts before time runs out. He talked for 40 minutes. Hadley did not say a single word. She sat at her kitchen table with her hand pressed flat against her mouth, and she listened to the whole architecture of what had been done to her: the falsified death certificate, the private transfer arranged within hours of the birth, the family foundation's name on every document, the money that changed hands so cleanly it left almost no fingerprints. Almost. Her daughters had never been dead. They had been taken, packaged into a sealed adoption file, and handed to a man who, Dr. Gilbert's voice dropped here genuinely, who he believed had not known the full truth of where they came from. She thanked him. She hung up. She sat in complete silence for a long time. Then she called Kim Yoon and told him to come alone. He knew something was wrong the moment she opened the door. She could see it in the way he stepped inside carefully, like the floor might not hold. She placed the documents on the table between them without a word. She watched his face as he read. She watched the control, that iron, practiced, total control, crack piece by piece like something structural giving way. She watched his jaw tighten, watched his hands go still, watched him reach the page with his mother's foundation letterhead and simply stop. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were devastated in a way that no amount of money or power could compose itself over. "I didn't know," he said. And the unbearable thing, the thing that made the whole room feel like it was splitting quietly down the middle, was that she believed him. Kim Yoon's mother's name is on the letterhead that destroyed Hadley's world. Is he the mastermind behind the kidnapping, or another victim of his mother's control? He disappeared for 9 days. No visits, no lawyers, no black sedan outside her building, just silence, and Hadley holding the girls through it, answering Leora's questions carefully, watching Laura draw empty windows in her sketchbook where she had previously drawn a tall figure in a dark coat. Even a 5-year-old noticed he was gone. Hadley told herself she didn't. What Kim Yun did in those 9 days, nobody fully knew. Not his board, not his legal team, not the 2 men who had flanked him at every important moment of his professional life for 7 years. He went through his mother's private records alone. Every file, every transaction, every sealed document inside the foundation she had built and run and used, he now understood as an instrument of control dressed as charity. He read for days. He barely slept. He sat inside the truth of who his mother had been beneath the version he had loved, and found that the 2 people were almost unrecognizable from each other. She had done it to protect the family name. That was the part that broke something permanent inside him. Not malice, not cruelty for its own sake, just the cold calculation of a powerful woman who had decided that a 22-year-old Black American student on a scholarship was not a suitable origin story for the KY bloodline. So she had simply rewritten it. And he had lived inside that rewrite for 5 years without ever knowing he was in it. On the 9th day, he called a press conference, His board tried to stop him, his lawyers tried to stop him, 3 of his oldest advisors threatened to resign if he walked into that room. He walked into that room. He did not disclose everything. The full truth belonged to Hadley and nobody else, but he dissolved the foundation publicly. He froze its assets. He named no one and needed to name no one because the people who understood power understood exactly what he was saying. He walked out of that building a smaller man professionally, and something about him, for the first time in as long as he could remember, felt clean. He drove to Hadley's building. He did not bring lawyers. He knocked, and when she opened the door, he looked at her, really looked, the way he had been carefully avoiding since the moment he realized she was not someone he could categorize and move past, and he said the only thing left that was true. "Tell me what you need from me."
It was a Tuesday. Nothing about it was supposed to be significant. Pasta on the stove, Laura's sketchbook open on the counter, Kim Yun sitting at the kitchen table with his jacket off for the first time Hadley could remember, looking almost like a man who was learning how to occupy a space without bracing against it. It had been 3 weeks since the press conference. 3 weeks of something fragile and unspoken growing in the spaces between all the things they still hadn't said to each other. Hadley put the food on the table. Leora picked up her fork, and then she put it back down. She looked at Hadley. Then she looked at Kim Yun. Then she looked at Hadley again with those dark, steady eyes that had never once in 5 years looked at anything without fully seeing it. "Are you our real mom and dad?" Nobody moved. "Because Laura drew us," Leora continued, her voice completely calm, completely certain, the voice of a child who had already decided the answer and simply wanted the adults in the room to stop being cowards about it. "We look like both of you." Laura didn't look up from her plate, but her small hand slid her sketchbook across the table. Hadley looked down at it. It was all of them, around this table, drawn in careful crayon lines the way Laura drew everything she needed to remember. Hadley's face, Kim Yun's face, Leora, Laura, a family arranged around a meal like it was the most natural thing in the world, like it had always been this way, like Laura had known long before any of them were ready to say it. Hadley felt her throat close completely. She looked up at Kim Yun. He was looking at the drawing with an expression she had never seen on him before. Unguarded, undone, every wall completely gone, and his jaw was working silently like a man trying to locate words in a language grief had stolen from him years ago. Leora picked her fork back up. "You don't have to answer right now," she said graciously. "I'll wait." The girls went to bed at 8:30. Leora negotiated for 9, settled for 8:45. Laura said nothing, tucked her sketchbook under her pillow the way she always did, and was asleep before Hadley had finished pulling the blanket up. Hadley stood in the doorway of their room for a moment longer than necessary. Then she went back to the kitchen. Kim Yun was still at the table. He hadn't moved. His jacket was still off, his hands were wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold 20 minutes ago, and he was staring at the sketchbook Laura had left behind, like it contained something he was still trying to fully absorb. Hadley sat down across from him. Neither of them spoke for a while. That was the thing nobody would have believed, that these two people, carrying this much, could sit in the same room in silence and have it feel less like tension and more like two people finally exhaling after years of holding their breath. "I need to ask you something," he said quietly. She waited. "What was done to you, inside my world, with my name on the building and my mother's money funding every decision?" He stopped, started again. "I am not asking you to forgive me. I know the difference, but I need to know." A pause that cost him something visible. "Can you forgive it? Any of it? Ever?" Hadley looked at him for a long time. She thought about 22, about the gray ceiling, about 3 days in a hospital bed signing papers through grief so total it had no bottom, about 5 years of a question she had carried alone in the dark. She thought about Laura's sketchbook. about Leora's hand finding hers at the door, about the specific feeling of something broken recognizing the shape of what it had lost. She didn't answer him, but she didn't leave. She reached over and turned his cold mug toward her, stood up and put the kettle on. And outside, for the first time in 3 days, the snow had finally stopped.
Before we continue, hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. And if you need more stories like this, hit the notification button. Watch out for what happened next, a lot of emotion and betrayal and love stories. The Korean CEO had a behind-the-scenes story that Hadley needs to know, even if it was painful, and about the love he developed for her after that on-night stand 5 years ago. Watch out for part 2. Peace.